Hello everyone and welcome to my coloring corner. Today is our fourth lesson in the beginner's guide to adult coloring. Now during the last three lessons we colored a page in Matchstick Mouse, this page here, and I showed you the beginnings of how I started coloring and how I've developed a little bit in the years as I have gone along. I have been coloring now for 7 years, and in the adult coloring world, of course, I've been coloring since I was a child, but in the adult coloring world, I've been coloring since for about 7 years. Yeah, and I've learned a few things along the way, and I'm going to show you a couple of things today. I received a bunch of text messages, like DMs, and Instagram messages and Facebook messages, as well as, questions on the comments below the video on the coverage of my page comparative to other pages. Now, there's several different factors that you need to take into consideration when you're coloring with your coverage, first of all. The first consideration, of course, is the paper in your book. Now, every Amazon book is printed in an Amazon printing facility, unless otherwise specified by the artist. Now, this is Amazon paper printed in a facility in, let's see, Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, the paper in Las Vegas, Nevada may be different than the paper in Kentucky or other places in the US. Definitely different than Amazon paper in Canada, and completely different than Amazon paper in Europe or Australia or other areas. So take into consideration your paper. Give it a feel. If it feels really smooth, you're going to have to use a lighter hand to build up those colors. If it's got a bit of tooth to it, like if it feels a little bit rough, you're going to have to start using a little bit more of a medium hand. And again, you're going to be building up those colors. Now, if it's really, really toothy, like it feels really rough to your hand, you're going to have to choose the set of pencils that you would use on that kind of paper. So there's several different factors. First of all, of course, is the paper. Second of all is the pencils you're choosing. And because we're all trying to utilize the same materials here, the Coloria pencils are a softer wax-based pencil. So they actually do squish when you press them. So when you're coloring heavily and using a heavy hand, you can literally blend those colors together just by pressing them together. These are the pencils that we're using. So there's paper is one of the contributing factors to whether or not your page looks different than mine. Everybody's page is going to look a little bit different. Whether you followed exactly the way I did it or the way that I said it, it's going to come out a little bit different because everybody is different. And then we have our environmental factors of, is it cold in your house? Is it hot in your house? Is your desk next to a window where you're getting the heat from the outside coming in, that sort of thing. All of those environmental factors also factor into it. And then there's the personal factors, your person factors, whether or not you're irritated that day, or you're not confident in what you're doing, or you're questioning what you're doing, whether or not your hand's light enough, whether that sort of thing is another factor. These are all factors that we slowly overcome in time. The environmental factors we figure out as we're coloring. I know for a fact in my house that if it is too cold, I don't use wax-based pencils because a wax-based pencil when it's cold is very hard. Um, Not so hard that you can't color with it, but it's a lot harder than it is when it's warm. So when it's really, really, really warm in my house, I also don't use a wax-based pencil because they become too squishy. The wax becomes very, very soft, and you basically have the ability to remove all tooth to your paper. So those are all different factors that come into play when it comes to coverage and coloring on a paper. Your emotional and physical and mental factors will slowly settle down and as confidence builds in your coloring. So, like I said, as we go along in our journey, all of these factors are figured out and are basically they solve themselves as you go along. Your hand gets used to coloring a certain way, your body gets used to coloring a certain way, and we work with it. And that's all, and practice. It's one of those things where you just have to continue doing it. You can't just decide 10 seconds after coloring that it's not looking exactly like the person you're following, so you can't do it. Everybody can do this. I don't think there's a single person out there that cannot color. There is no right, there is no wrong. There's a billion different ways to do things. All right, so the other thing I was going to talk to you about, and this is what we're going to work on today and what we're going to practice for the week, is different types of pencil strokes. So I'm going to zoom you in so you can see what I'm doing as soon as I can figure out how to do that again. For some reason my zoomy thing is turned off. So I'm going to zoom you in. So we're going to be working on this part here. This part here we're going to deal with after. But for now, for the first part of this video, we're going to deal with the different types of pencil strokes. So there's a type of pencil stroke called scrubbing. Now this is what I do when I'm coloring. Another one that I do, especially for fabrics and things like that, where I don't want or I'm not worried about the white coming through, is hatch or crosshatch. I typically do crosshatch, but we're going to look at that as well. And then what a lot of people do find that they're doing, especially if they're just starting out, is a back and forth. And then, of course, we have stippling. Now, I'm going to grab a couple of pencils here, and we're going to work on the different techniques of each of them. So I'm going to grab a nice, I want to grab a color that will stand out against the white paper. I'm doing this in the back of the Matchstick Mouse book because it's the paper that we're going to be working with. So grab your book, draw some circles on the last page of the book. There's a blank page at the end of the book. So grab hold of that and a colored pencil, any color you want. Now scrubbing, if you watch the tip of my pencil, is little circles. I try to maintain a very sharp point to my pencil when I'm scrubbing, because depending upon the paper, if it's a very very smooth paper, having a sharp tip to your pencil will cut into that paper a little bit better and lift up some of it to give you a little bit of extra tooth. So another thing I do that you probably have noticed while I'm coloring is I constantly turn my pencil. Now the reason for this is because as you color, you wear down that side of the pencil. And when you turn it, as long as you're turning it consistently and constantly, and it becomes literally a habit, you don't notice you're doing it unless somebody points it out. So this is stippling, and the results of stippling as we fill in the space. Now you can do a lighter stippling and a heavier stippling, or scrubbing, I mean, not stippling, scrubbing. And then when you go over top of it with your next layer, it fills in all of those areas. Now this is a tight scrubbing on this area. Now you can also do a looser scrubbing, which is a larger circular motion to cover those larger areas. I find this works really well for covering large objects, like so. So what I want you to do is I want you to practice by drawing a couple of circles on the back of your book. I want you to practice the different strokes and find what works best for you on covering the paper with the color and getting it to a point of saturation that you want it to be. Some people don't enjoy the scrubbing motion. They don't enjoy doing the circles. It can be sore on the hand. It can be sore on the wrist, you know, that sort of thing. And now I'm using a lighter hand here. And as you can see, I'm still getting that coverage, but I'm not getting a heavy coverage. Now I've switched over to the sharp side of my pencil, which cuts into the paper and puts a little bit more pigment down. So if I'm using a dull side of a pencil, and even though I'm scrubbing, which will fill a lot more of the tooth than hatching, if I let the pencil go dull, it doesn't cut into the paper as much. It doesn't fill the paper as much as if it is a sharp pencil. So that is scrubbing. Now the hatch is literally strokes, just little strokes. And you can go back over and fill that in. But this is literally what it is. It's not a back and forth stroke, it's a one directional stroke with your pencil. You can get coverage this way. However, you are going to find that you have a lot more possibility of that white spot showing through and uneven coverage. Now the next one is cross hatching. Now what cross hatching is still the same stroke. So we're going to put the strokes all the way down. Now cross hatching is coming back with the opposing direction on your stroke. So I went this way, now I'm coming in this way, which does fill that white spot in a lot more. Now you can do this loose, which is like this, and get a good texture for things such as wood, fabric, that sort of thing. But as you can see, it's still one of those ones where you are going to get different variations, different layers, different levels of depth in your laydown, which is not a bad thing. It's actually a technique that I use when, like I said, when I'm coloring things that I want that texture to be in, or if I want to cover an area quite quickly. Now, I am not fond of the um, lack of constant coverage. So I've got an area here that's too heavy. This area over here is not too bad, but this area here is quite light. And you can definitely see in the laydown that it's a little bit splotchy. So I'm not quite happy with that type of technique. Now another one that a lot of people use, and I use this when I'm doing large areas, is the back and forth. The back and forth is just taking your pencil and going back and forth with it. Yes, you can cover really large areas with this, but even if you do a heavy hand on it, you're going to get an uneven coverage. I do use this technique when I'm coloring large areas. Now, I do tend to, when I'm getting into tighter areas, go back to my scrubbing. But yes, back and forth is a technique that a lot of people use, and it's a very viable technique. As you go along, if this is what you choose to use, you can definitely get great coverage, but you're going to have to layer that up. You can press a little harder. So for example, this area here that's very light, I'm going to press a little harder, and I'm going to get that coverage. However, I'm also taking the tooth of the paper out. So even though I've got the coverage, I've used a heavy hand on the paper to get that coverage. And what that means is that when I come back through with another color, I'm not going to get the amount of color build up in that area that I want. So you can get a good buildup of color just by going back and forth, back and forth. Don't have to press hard on it, and it is a great technique. I do find that I end up with a duller pencil, but it is a great technique. I don't get as well of coverage, like for example this area here where I've scrubbed over it a couple of times. You can barely see any of the white spot, and you can see the gradients from uh, an overlapping scrubbing to a medium scrubbing to a one layer scrubbing. So you can see as I went building up those layers. Where with this, it's all going to be a consistent buildup in the areas that you go over top of. You're going to see areas where your lines from going back and forth are showing through, and you're going to have to come back over those lines. One of the reasons why I'm not fond of doing that is I find for myself that I end up with too harsh of a color in the area that I want a medium coverage in, just by trying to get rid of that white spot. I end up putting too much color down. But as you can see, even with the hard to the medium to the continual movement of the pencil, you still have a really good amount of coverage. Like I said, you are going to see a lot more white spot, with this technique, but and that all depends upon you. That all depends upon your patience and going back and forth over top of the paper, or whether or not you have a heavy hand or not. This technique does put a lot of pigment on the paper, so utilizing the tools such as the Caran d'Ache blender on this technique does give you the ability to move that pigment around and get a softer edge, a thicker coverage, that sort of thing. So that is the back and forth. Now this is called stippling, and it's literally little dots. You will find that this is very time consuming, but there are things that require doing that stippling technique to build the color. And when it's done correctly, um, it can be really, really pretty, and you can get many different variations of color in your area that you're stippling. So I just sharpen the pencil, and literally it's just the tip of the pencil dotting. I tend to do stippling more in really, really tiny areas that I want to put 2 or 3 colors in, but I don't want to take up too much of the tooth of the paper, or I don't want too dark of an area. I also tend to do this more with pen than I do with colored pencil, because I'm constantly worried about breaking my pencil. So there's some of this color in there. Now, one of the great things with stippling is you can take a secondary color and go in and stipple through there as well. And keep adding color into those blank areas. Like I said, it is extremely time consuming, and one of the reasons why a lot of people don't use this technique. But it does give a really pretty visual for doing certain things. I also do tend to do this more on like fish scales and stuff like that, if I want it to have that white spot show through more. The reason why you would want the white spot showing through is for reflection, for highlight, for texture. Now before, when I first started out, I did not like the white spot. I would blend that right out of the page. I was happy to remove the white spot. And coloring with Shani Blue. Her name is Shannon, and she is a really, really sweet woman that does have a channel here on YouTube. And she taught me that embracing the white spot was a good thing. White spot is helpful when you're coloring. So I have gotten better. I can't say that I'm perfect with it, because sometimes the white spot still drives me crazy, but I have gotten better at judging where I want that white spot to be and where I don't want it to be. So I have gotten to a point where I can embrace the white spot, but it is something that in the beginning of my journey I did not like the look of. So I was happy to remove it in any means possible. Speaking of any means possible, is another thing that we are going to talk about today is blenders. Now, there are a lot of different ways to blend colored pencils, including chemical ways. Now, I will never suggest to you that you purchase a astringent um, chemical to blend your pencils. It does work. You can use Gamsol. You can use, what is the other one? You can use different oils. You can use the Gamsol. There's another one as well. Um, it's an orange scented oil stuff. But I find that after using them myself for a little while, Turpentine is another one, um, that the smell really gets to people, including myself, and it was actually giving me headaches. So I don't suggest that to anybody because I don't know what your tolerances are of it. Now, there are some things I do suggest to some people at some of the times, especially people that want to blend without using a blender pencil. I personally think that the blender pencil is one of those things that is indispensable when it comes to blending colored pencil. However, there are several different things and different materials that you can get to blend colored pencil. One of which is a blender pen, which I seem to have lost. Um, where's my blender pen? I had it out, and then I cleaned off my desk and decided, well, I don't need that. And I'll throw it back into my drawer here, which, yeah, you should never do because you'll lose it. Okay, so there's this one. Where's the other one? There it is. And this one. So these are all water-based blender pens. Of course, you can also utilize an alcohol blender pen. But there's other ways that you can blend as well that are not as mainstream. One of which is, let's see, do I have it out? Um, where did I put it? Utilizing things such as coconut oil, baby oil, or Vaseline is another one that people have used. So in this one here, I have some Vaseline in this container. I have some Vaseline. This is a solid stone container, so the Vaseline will not get too warm or absorb into the containers. This one here has a little bit of coconut oil in it. Again, it is a stone container, so this one here will absorb it a little bit because it's the raw stone, or raw plaster or plaster of Paris, whatever it's called. Now, a lot of people will use a Q-tip for that or a eyeshadow blending tool. We're going to use eyeshadow blending tool just because I have it handy. And I'm going to show you how to blend or how these all blend comparative to a blending pencil. The blending pencils that I typically use is the Caran d'Ache blender or the Derwent blender or that sort of thing. I try to stick with my blending pencils instead of the chemical and messy kind of blenders. I can't find my blending pencil. There it is. So this is the Caran d'Ache Bright Stick, and that's typically what you will see me use. So we're going to take our pink here, and we're going to take a lighter pink as well. And we're going to move things around to create a bit of a blend using the oils first of all. So this part you don't have to do. You know, you can do one or two tests with things around the house that you might want to try. But what I suggest, especially in coloring books, is that if your paper is quite thin, I would suggest using a pencil blender instead of using things such as a oil blender or a water-based blender or a chemical blend. Just going to move you up a little here so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going back and forth. I'm using the back and forth. The reason why I'm using back and forth is because it gives me a lot more white spot to blend into. And that's what I'm trying to show you here is how to remove or fill in that white spot if you have gotten to the color that you are satisfied with. If you've gotten to the saturation and the color level that you're satisfied with, and you don't want to add any more color to build up and cover up that white spot, you can use a blender to do that. And we're going to take a look at how to do that here. So I've covered over and layered the two colors together here in the middle. Just making sure I have enough pigment on the page to move those colors around. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to use Vaseline. And I'm just going to put it on this side. Just a little bit. It doesn't need to be a lot. It just needs to be on there. If you put too much on, you will find that you have a greasy area on your page. Try not to put it anywhere but on your pencil. And you put it on, and then you flip it over, and you rub it in and pick up any excess. Now, as you can see in this area here, we've gone off the page a little bit, or off the wax area a little bit, and we are creating a bit of a stain there. And as you can see, I can blend that off and basically remove the saturation. However, what I feel that it's doing more than blending is lifting off that pigment instead of breaking it down and moving it into those smaller areas. I feel it's breaking it down and lifting it off. The other way that people do the same thing is with coconut oil or baby oil. I found baby oil was very, very slick and did not do well for the paper itself. But coconut oil is another one that people use. And there's several different techniques of doing this with the oils and the Vaseline. This is just one of them. I will show you another one as well here in just a second. So I've got the layer down. I'm going to use the opposing side. So I'm going to use this side with our coconut oil. Now, coconut oil is quite a solid form of oil. So, and sometimes does not work on wax-based pencils. So you may find that it just does absolutely nothing at all. You may find that it just breaks down the pigment and lifts it off, which it is doing. Now you take the other side, you rub it off, and basically it's lifted off that pigment instead of moving it around. Now, if you are coloring very, very small areas and you want some pigment in those areas. I'm going to grab this thing here, and we're just going to put a very small circle here. And I want that circle to have both the purple pink as well as the regular pink in it. I need my brush to brush off any excess. And this is the other technique that has gone around for quite some time. And basically what you do is you take the tip of your pencil, you dip it in, so there's a little bit on there. And you can lay it down. And as you can see, it does cover really, really well that way. Again, I'm using a scrubbing motion, which is this, with a bit of a looser scrub. Now, when you do this, make sure that you have a piece of paper towel or something nearby where you can wipe off the tip of your pencil, because that mixture that they use, or the Vaseline itself, or I'm not quite sure what it is, but it will break down your pencil. So I'm going to the lighter pink now, dipped it in the Vaseline, and I'm blending those colors together here, bringing that Vaseline into the other color and blending it in. Now you will find that with the Vaseline process, you may not be able to come in through with another color on top of this to blend together. So I've wiped this clean. Now I want to blend this into here with a bit smoother motion. So there's still Vaseline on there and it will blend. But if I said came through with another color, I may not be able to, especially if I went through and lifted up all that Vaseline. But Vaseline does work quite nicely. Dipping your pencil in the Vaseline, as long as you remember to wipe it off, does not cause any damage to your pencil. That sort of thing. I'm not going to use any sort of chemical ones because I just don't like the smell of them, and I don't like what they do to my head. They give me a horrible migraine. So these three pens here are all water-based pens. These two here are specifically created for blending colored pencil, one of which is a Koi product, one of which is a Finesse. The nibs on these break down very quickly, so you will find that you'll get a fraying of your nib, especially on the Finesse. But as you can see, I can break down and move that pigment into all of those little white spots and basically create a blended area. And I need to wipe that off. Make sure you remember to wipe off your nib, otherwise you will end up with that color somewhere else. Alright, so now we're going to use the Koi. And again, it's the same thing. My Koi is a little bit dry, but it's a water-based marker, and it just breaks down the pigment, moves it around. I find that the Finesse works a little bit better, but the Koi has a better nib. Both of which are not something I gravitate towards. However, it does work very, very well. Another one, of course, is this one here. This is a Karen, and this is created for the Karen markers, which are water-based markers. It is very, very juicy, but as you can see, it just breaks it down and moves it around so that you can get that blend in there. one of the great things about using this type of blender, it gives you the ability to extend the blend. So I can drag this down and make it lighter down here at the bottom. I can make it darker up here on the edge. So it gives you the ability to extend that blend out a little, but it also leaves the texture of the paper. It may not be visual, but it's still there because it's not being pressed down as it would if you were using a blender itself. Now, another one that people use, and I have used myself, is an alcohol blender. Now, an alcohol blender is going to break this down and dry a lot faster than a water-based blender, but with some pencils, it's not an even smooth blend. It doesn't break down all the pencil all the time, and you get a couple of areas where you will see more pencil than others. But it does work quite nicely. If you keep on going over it too many times, however, you will find that it will start lifting off your pencil and saturating your page. Now, these both will go through. Like for example, this one here actually went all the way through, pushed that pigment through to the back side of the page, as you can see there. The alcohol blender started pushing it through a little bit, but the water-based, the Karen, pushed it through a lot. Where this one here, which is the water-based actual colored pencil marker area, it shadowed it, but it didn't push it through. So that's another thing that you have to be very careful of when using these products on your colored pencils is do a test area. Make sure these are not going to push that color through to your other page. Now, the ones that I usually use is the Caran d'Ache and the Derwent. There are so many different blending pencils out there. Find what works best for you and use it. A lot of people find that the Caran d'Ache blender works well for them. A lot of people don't. So find what works best for you. I had to go through a lot of blenders to find what was working best for me. So as you can see here, the Caran d'Ache blender just moves it around and smooths it out. It just fills in that white spot and smooths it out. Now the Derwent blender will do the same thing. However, I find that the Derwent blender is a little dry and it works really well, especially on heavily colored areas without pressing down that tooth too much where you can't add more. So what it's going to do is it's still going to fill in those spots, but I feel that because it's a little bit of a rougher pencil, a little bit drier, that it's not pushing down as much as it is moving around. Where with the Caran d'Ache, it feels more like it's pushing it down and moving it around. Where with, like I said, with the Derwent, I feel that it's not pushing it down as much as the Caran d'Ache. But as you can see, it still completely covered the area the same way that the Caran d'Ache did. Now with stippling, you don't typically want to blend it because you want that variation of light and dark in there. So a stippling I would not blend at all. Now you can come down here and take your blender and clean up any blends with those. However, if you don't have enough pigment on the page, like these areas here where the pigment has been lifted off, you're going to find that you're not getting a lot of movement more of scraping and lifting up and putting elsewhere, which I guess is still classified as movement, but it doesn't brighten it, doesn't give it that blended solid look. All right, so that is the information that I wanted to talk to you about with technique as well as blending. Now the actual lesson is going to be our lights and the directional lighting. So we're going to take a look at some lighting and some shadows, and we're going to verify directional lighting, and we're going to start on a page next lesson with some directional lighting. So the page we're going to start on is in here somewhere, this one here. Now it's a wonderful little mouse sweeping the floor. She has directional lighting coming through the window. So the sun is coming down this way. There's also a little bit of directional lighting coming in through this door and this window. So the main one that we're going to concentrate on is the directional lighting that's coming in through here. I'm going to zoom you out just a little bit so you can see my diorama, because I actually made a diorama to show this to you, oddly enough. Yes, I'm strange. So we saw the picture. We all know what page we're doing here. So as you can see, we're looking at the directional light coming from here. So we're going to come up from this top corner with our light. And so here's our diorama. So this is the same picture with the areas that the light is going to come through cut out, as well as the object that is standing in the middle of the light that is going to create a shadow. So hopefully I don't have enough light or too much light coming from the direction behind me to cast on this area here, or overcast the area that I want the light to come through. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to, I'm trying to figure out the best way to show this to you. We're going to watch in the front area here the amount of shadow that this little guy here is going to cast down here, and the shadow that the plant area here in front of the window is going to cast in. So I've made it so that it's literally like a wall and him standing in front of it. Now I'm going to take my lamp here and turn it on, but I'm going to turn it down because it's really bright. So as you can see, if we come in from the corner, I'm going to have to move this here, from the corner, so that's the corner of our page, the light coming through here is causing this little guy here to have shadow that way. So when the light comes in, it's going to hit this corner and the back of him. So this area here on the little mouse, so the area where his hat is, his shoulder, his tail, is all going to create shadow over here. So that's what we're going to work on, is the directional information of this page here. Now, one of the things that I was going to show you, and I'm still going to show you, is the way that you can see what directional shadow is. So for example, if I put an orange here and I put the light right over top of the orange, the directional shadow is very minimal on the edge. It's light, but the underneath of the orange, as you could probably see right back here, is quite dark. So that's the directional shadow of a light right over top of it. Now if I take the light and I put it this way, you can see that this side here is lit up and this side here is not. So this side's going to be darker than this side. And the shadow is going to come out around the back. So as you can see here, it's darker here, and then as the light comes around it, it lightens. So you're going to have a shadow right around the back side here. Same with if we go this way. One side is going to be darker, one side's going to be lighter. Now if we have an overhead directional shadow from this direction, of course it's going to give that direction shadow behind it. The top part in the direction that your light is coming, so say it's coming from the lower left-hand side, this lower left-hand side section of the orange is going to have more light than this section here where that shadow is. And then same here. If we go this way, so from above, coming from pretty much across from it, basically you can follow that shadow all the way around the orange, depending upon which way the light is. So choose your light source and just think of your main object in your page to be the orange. So if your light is coming from the upper left-hand side of your page, the shadow is going to be going down towards the lower left-hand side of your page. And vice versa. If you go from the upper left-hand side of your page, the shadows are going to be moving to the lower right side of your page. If you go across the edge of your left-hand side of your page, the shadow is going to be moving towards, or the right side of your page, the shadow is going to be moving towards your left. If you put it up at the top, the shadow is going to be moving down towards the bottom. So basically, the opposing side of the object from the light is where that light is going to be, or where that shadow is going to be. So with Matchstick Mouse and the page that we're working on, like I showed you in the diorama, I'm going to turn this off now. Turn off. Get it out of the way. We're going to move the diorama. So as I showed you on the diorama, we have a window here. That's going to be our main light source. The sun is streaming in the window, making a wonderful, happy spring day. Great day for the spring cleaning. But the light is coming in behind him in the directional corner of the room. So when it comes in, it's going to light up the back of him, but it's going to shadow in front of him. So that's what we're going to work on next week when we start coloring this page. What I want you to do for your continued practice, your artistic practice, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to call homework. So I think artistic practice is a great one. Practice your technique. So practice whether or not you want to do a scrubbing effect, which is little circles, round and round and round. Now you can do larger circles, smaller circles, but practice each of these to figure out which one you find works best for you. Sometimes you will find all of them work best for you. Like me, I do find that different ones work for different things. When I'm coloring a full area, 99% of the time, I'm going to use the scrubbing motion. If I'm coloring a background and I want to fill in an area with one color, I will use a back and forth motion. If I'm coloring fabric and I want some of that white spot to show through, I may use a crosshatch or hatching. Hatching I use 99% of the time for hair. So what I mean I use for hair is that it's that flick, 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 flick motion. And that is what we use for hair. So practice those. Practice, draw 3 circles on your page here and practice where your shadow is going to be. Practice where your light's going to be and practice where your shadow is going to be. So if my light is coming from this direction, that's my light is coming from where the L is. This area here is going to be lit up. So we're going to use the lightest color in the lit up area. Now you can also use a little bit of white, or depending upon how lit up, like if you're using something that has a colored light in it, that edge is going to have the color of the light. So if you're using a lantern or fire or that sort of thing, you're going to have a bit of a color there. Now we're going to stop where we know that light is going to stop and it's going to start getting darker. So then we start coming in with that darker color and use a lighter hand until we're moved into the shadow area. So this is going to be our shadow area down here, of course. And not to mention, if you're thinking of the orange, down here where it's touching that table, we're going to get even more of a shadow as well. And I went out of the lines, but that's okay. So down here where it's touching the table, we're going to push a little tiny bit. Not a lot, just enough that you can see that it's sitting on the table. And then we're going to push into the back here. And we're going to start moving that into, with a medium hand, into the shadow area. As we get closer to the light area, lift your hand and give a light hand coating of the darker color, because it's still shadowed there, but we want it to be a little lighter. And then you take your lighter color and you come in here and you blend it, because that light is still there. We don't want it to be, completely taken over. We just want to see that transition moving from the dark to the light. And then we have our shadow that comes out here. And comes around here because it's coming the opposite direction. The triangle, the reason why I did the triangle is because it shows where it's sitting on the table and then where it's going to put in that rounded shadow behind it. Now this part here, of course, is going to be darker, so we're going to make sure that that's a little bit darker down here at the base. And then we're just going to lighten our hand as we move out. I'm going to slowly add a bit of a curvature to it. Now this is the table here, so the curvature is going to only be out a little bit. And basically that shows the shadow of the object. Now you can also lessen that shadow as you go out with a little bit of the lighter color or with a gray. Now typically I would not color a table the same color as the object, but this is just for visual purposes. So this is where it's hitting the table. I'm going to take my black pencil so I can put a table in here. So it's not on the edge of the table. This is just the table that it's sitting on. So we're going to put a couple of slats here, some of which the shadow is going to sit on. Okay, so that's the tabletop right here where the object is sitting on it. And we've got everything underneath it is also table. But this is where the main area is, you know. I think I completely messed that up, but I'll figure it out. Basically, this is our orange, right? And this is our light. Maybe. There we go. And that's our light source. See how it's going across the direction. So we're going from this corner. We've got it flat on the table. Because it's a rounded object, we're going to have a dark shadow. We're going to go this way. We're going to have a dark shadow coming from this area. So basically across from. So there's a dark shadow under here, and then a medium shadow comes out around. So in the front, there's going to be a little tiny bit of a dark shadow, and then it comes around. So basically, if I was to take this pencil and just draw in the dark shadow, it's really, really cruddy drawing job, but so that's the dark shadow, and then we're going to come in and we're going to draw the light shadow. Okay. I am no good at drawing circles, obviously, so we'll just clean that up a little. I am really bad at drawing shadows. Now our object comes in through here. I do believe, yes. So our object is right in the center here. So this is where our object is. So this is where the circle is. Now because this is a three-dimensional object, we're going to do this. There's our orange. I am really bad at drawing, I must say. So this is where our object is. So we're going to come in under here with our darkest shadow. So we're going to use a heavier hand in this area here, right around the object. Try to make it as proper as we can. And underneath the edge of the object, because of the fact that it is three-dimensional, it's curved, there's still going to be an overhang that's there even though the light's hitting it. Right? And then we're going to come into here with a lighter hand because this is our light area. And as you can see, I'm still scrubbing, just a really loose scrub. Now you can do a back and forth motion in here, that sort of thing, because we want this to be fairly loose because we're going to start adding other color. We want it to be the darkest or one of the darkest areas, but we want it to be lighter than this dark area here around the object. And then for the light area, we're still going to come out here a little bit more, just a little bit so that we have something to blend into, so that we don't have a harsh transition into that medium and dark area. Now this is the dark area, so I'm just going to put a little bit more here. just so that we see the transition. And then we're going to come out here. Now typically you can, because it's a table, you can use any color that is on the table, on the floor, or whatever. Of course, you're not going to do all of your shadows and everything in pink. Just saying, just pointing that out there because, you know, just just want to clarify, all your shadows don't have to be pink. Now I'm doing this very loosely. Of course, you can do it much tighter and that sort of thing. I'm just showing you the differences between the front and the back and where your shadow is going to fall. All right, now for the orange part. So the part that the light is hitting directly, we're going to take this color here, just so that you can see a little bit better what we're working on with direction. So this part here is going to have that light because it's coming from this direction. All of this is going to have light. Now the light's going to start dissipating as we start hitting here. So it's going to be this and this that is going to be lit up. And once the light starts dissipating, we start moving into those lighter orange colors up until the center area. Again, just doing very loosely. I'm not perfect at coloring. I'm not perfect at, definitely not perfect at drawing, anything like that. The bottom area here, because of the fact that there's a curvature there, the bottom area is going to show a little bit of that orange that you have coming into it for that orange color. The reason why I put down that yellow first is because even though we're going to show the light there, we still want to show that that is an orange. So putting that light color down first gives me the ability to blend that orange in and still have it look like an orange. Now we're going to color this whole area here with the orange color. I'm just going to judge. Yes. And one more. Yes. And now we're going to color up here because that's still getting a little bit of that light up here. But as we get into this area back here, it's going to start getting darker. So I'm going to lay this down with a very light hand because I still want that orange color. And then we're going to go over it with a darker orange. So we're going to go over that lighter orange with this one. And we're going to blend that in, darkening up that shadowed area. And darkening up that bottom area especially, because that's where the deepest shadow is going to be, is down here at the bottom of that curve. And this area over here as well. We're going to deepen up that curve area and then bring that light or that dark up into the light. Like so. So if you're looking down, directly down from the top of the object, which is the orange, and you're looking at a light or seeing the object with a light coming through the window, coming through this corner, you're going to see pretty much what we have here, where that shadow is coming in the back and blocking it out. Now, if I had used a gray, this would probably look a little bit more logical and more common sensual instead of, all higgly-piggly like it does. But I didn't use gray, so I'm sorry. Hopefully you understood the concept of it and that sort of thing, but that's what I want you to do. I want you to take a lamp or something, or just with your own brain, with your own mind, go directional. So I'm going to go this way, so I'm going to have a shadow here. So I'm going to fill that in with the shadow here. As it gets closer to the object, the thinner the shadow is. So if the light is really, really far away, the larger the shadow is. Okay, same with this way. Say this is right up, right over top of it almost. So say this is coming right over top of this object. So this is over top. So the light for this is actually going to be directly underneath it, and it's going to just barely give a little bit of a shadow around it and underneath it. So for example, if this is above the area, so say this is hanging from a tree and there's a light or a lantern right above it, you're going to get a bit of a larger shadow underneath where that light is coming through. So if I go like this, here, this will work better. So I've got my little fairy here. If I hung her directly off of the lamp, the shadow below her, let's see if I can move this slightly. No, it's going to hit the shadow below her is going to be directly below and then moving in the opposing direction. But the shadow is going to be less than if she was touching the page. See what I mean? So if we look at her shadow directly under her on the page, it's really dark. Where when I was above the page, it was lighter. So the shadow is still going to be there even if they're above the area that you're coloring. So if I'm coloring her flying up and a flower here, the area right underneath her is going to have a little bit of a shadow, and then the area behind her is going to have a bit of a shadow, if that makes sense. So because this is directly on the surface, it's going to have more of that directional shadow. So that's what I want you to practice. I want you to practice a object on a surface and where that shadow is going to be from the top. So this is top, and then directionally. So left, right, that sort of thing. Also practice your scrubbing, your hatch, your cross hatch, your back and forth, and your stippling, and find the type of um, coverage that you prefer most. You know, type of stroke on your page that you prefer the most. If you prefer stippling more, then do stippling. If you prefer the look of cross-hatching more, do cross-hatching. I personally scrub. That's just what I do when I want full coverage and a depth of color is I scrub. I go in little circles, moving my pencil as the area fills. We are not all the same, and remember that. You do not have to color exactly the same way I do. And sometimes, even if you do color the exact same way I am coloring, you may not end up with the exact same results. And that is fine. That is called being being an individual and creating as an individual. Everybody's different. There is no wrong way of coloring. Just remember that. All right, guys, with that, that is our lesson for today. This is a preparation for our secondary color of a directional light source. We will start that next week. I have decided that I will be putting out the videos every week on Thursday. So keep an eye out next Thursday for a actual coloring video. I know this one has taken a while, but we have covered a couple of different things. We've covered the different techniques, the different coloring stroke styles. We've colored our lights and shadows, the different ways that light moves from one direction to another instead of just straight on, where the last one we looked at was just straight on. Another thing that we have looked at is the differences between different ways to blend a colored pencil area. I do find, and I will recommend constantly, pencil blenders. Yes, alcohol blenders work really well, especially on different really hard to blend pencils. Same with the finesse and the um, zig or koi, sorry, blenders. They work really well as you can see here. However, I do find that it lifts some of the saturation compared to this area here where I used the pencil blenders. You can definitely see a difference in color and in saturation. So I prefer to use my pencil blenders over top of any other. This area here, yeah, this area here was blended with alcohol marker. This area here was blended with the water-based markers, and as you can see, it lifts off the paper a little bit, and I just don't like it. Um, this one here was blended with our blenders, and I find that it just works better than any of those. Um, so we did blenders, we did the different lights, different directions of light, and we also did different techniques of color laydown. Find what works best for you. Take a page. I just used the last page in the book because this is the paper we're going to be working on. It is best to figure out these things on a page from a book or a page from the paper that you're printing on something that you're going to use more often than not. Because we're using this book, I wanted to know the best way to do this in this book. And this is definitely one of the ways to do that. So as you can see, I can take the blender and now moving from light to dark, I can smooth out that back and forth motion. with a little bit of a scrubbing motion and get a really good layer of blend. Showing our light, but also showing that that is an orange, and showing our dark side of the orange. Sort of like the dark side of the moon, you know? We want the dark side of the orange. So you can grab a piece of fruit and a flashlight and just go from different directions so that you can actually visually see the way that the light moves around a three-dimensional object, and work with it that way, which will give you a little bit more insight on whether or not you want a darker color in one area, a lighter color in another area. But the main focus on today was so that I can show you the differences between where the light comes from. Last time we did you as the light, so from directly in front of the object or directly overhead, whichever way you want to look at it. This one here, we're going to be doing it as there is a sun coming through the window. So as you can see here, we've got our little mouse, we've got our window. So I'm going to stand it up so that it's directional. So our window is coming through, the light is coming through our window here, which is giving us shadow. So let's see if I can do this right. So it's giving us shadow across here where our little mouse is coming in. So when we're coloring this, I've got too much stuff on my desk again. So when we're coloring this and the light's coming through the window here, the little mouse is going to have color, a light area down here, especially up here, because the light's coming directly through this window. So it's going to come this way. So down through the window. So the light's going to come in through here. It's going to hit the back of him as well as everything from here to about here on his hat is going to have a light area. But the shadow is going to start back here on his tail, and it's going to come out in front of him. Now there's a little bit of a light source coming from this way as well. However, the light itself is coming down in this direction here. So when you have a light source from outside especially, even though the sun is coming through here, the light is still going to come through each of those. So you may have just a little lighter area here, and when you come through here, there's no object to cause shadow. So it may light up a little bit of the floor coming directly in front of it. So we will get further into that information next time when we start coloring our happy little mouse doing the spring cleaning. All right, guys, with that, that is your practice for the week. Practice your scrubbing, your hatch and your cross hatch, your back and forth, as well as your stippling, and find what works best for you. Also make sure that you try to take an orange, take a round object, an orange, a ball, something, and put a light over top of it in every direction so that you can watch that shadow and see where that shadow is going. Do a couple of little test areas to get used to drawing and coloring a shadow. All right, and then starting next week, we will be coloring the little mouse. Like I said, the little spring cleaning mouse. That should be right here. There he is. So we will color this one next week, starting next week. It shouldn't take too long. It's not a whole lot of information, but in a way it is at the same time. It should take about 2 or 3 different sessions, and we should have it colored up. All right, guys, I hope this has not been horribly confusing for you. Um, Definitely give it some practice, and I will see you on Thursday. Until next time, always remember to relax, color, and stay safe, everyone. Until next time, bye-bye for now.